December 18th, 1946. The wind howling down 53rd Street carried needles of ice, but inside the Stork Club, the air was warm, scented with expensive perfume, roasted duck, and the heavy, intoxicating aroma of absolute power. This was the sanctuary of white America's elite, movie stars, senators, and the mobsters who owned them both. It was a world of velvet ropes and unwritten rules, the most sacred of which was simple. People with skin the color of midnight did not walk through the front door unless they were carrying a tray or a broom. But at 9 p.m., the impossible happened. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the hum of conversation, the laughter of debutantes, the clinking of crystal, died instantly. It was as if someone had cut the power to the building. Standing in the foyer was not a servant, but a sovereign. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson stood framed by the golden light of the vestibule, wearing a bespoke tuxedo cut from midnight blue wool that fit him better than the skin fits a snake. He didn't look down. He didn't shuffle. He scanned the room with the cool, predatory detachment of a man inspecting a new acquisition. The maitre d', a man who could stop a senator with a raised eyebrow, found himself paralyzed. He opened his mouth to stammer a refusal, to cite a reservation error, but the words died in his throat when Bumpy's gaze landed on him. It wasn't a look of aggression, it was a look of absolute certainty. Bumpy stepped past him, moving through the sea of frozen faces like a shark gliding through a coral reef. He knew exactly where he was going. He was headed to the cub room, the inner sanctum, to table 50, the table of Charles Lucky Luciano. Luciano was sitting with his back to the wall, a glass of cognac in one hand and a burning resentment in his heart. The government was closing in. Deportation was looming like a storm cloud. He needed one last massive score to secure his exile in Italy, and he had decided that score would come from squeezing Harlem dry. When he saw Bumpy approach, Luciano didn't stand. He simply gestured to the empty chair opposite him, a smirk playing on his scarred face. To Luciano, Bumpy was just a localized phenomenon, a big fish in a small, dark pond. Luciano was the ocean. "You have big balls, Bumpy," Luciano said, his voice a gravelly rasp. "Walking in here like you own the joint? Sherman Billingsley would have a heart attack if he wasn't already passed out in his office." Bumpy sat down, smoothing his jacket. "Mr. Billingsley knows better than to interrupt the business meeting, Charles, especially one this expensive." Luciano chuckled, but there was no humor in it. He slid a piece of paper across the linen tablecloth. It was a contract. Simple, brutal. "I'm done playing games with the numbers, Bumpy. The commission wants stability. You keep the title, you keep the fame. But the money? We take 40%. Of the numbers, of the heroin, of everything. You refuse, and I will have the NYPD turn Harlem into a parking lot. I'll arrest every runner, shut down every spot, and break every bone on 125th Street until you're begging me to take 50%. Bumpy looked at the paper. He didn't pick it up. He didn't read it. He looked tired, almost bored. He raised a hand, not to strike, but to summon. A young busboy, a black kid named Marcus, who had been trying to blend into the wallpaper, hurried over, his hands trembling. The tension in the room was enough to crush a man, but the boy knew his duty. He struck a match. Bumpy leaned in, the flame illuminating the sharp angles of his face, and lit a thick Cuban cigar. He took a long drag, exhaling a plume of blue smoke that drifted directly into Luciano's face. "Thank you, son," Bumpy said to the boy. "Go check on the coat check girl. She's cold." The boy nodded and vanished. Bumpy turned his eyes back to Luciano. "You think you have power, Charles, because you pay the police commissioner's mortgage. You think you own the law because you play golf with the judges. I don't think, Bumpy. I know," Luciano snapped, tapping the table. "I own this city. No, Bumpy said softly. You rented, and your lease is up. Bumpy reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a silk napkin. It was from the Stork Club, monogrammed, pristine. But folded inside it was something else. A thin, translucent sheet of onion skin paper. A carbon copy. It was crumpled, stained with coffee grounds and ash. Bumpy smoothed it out and placed it gently on top of Luciano's extortion contract. Luciano looked down. His eyes narrowed. Then they widened. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. It was an internal memo from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Subject, Operation Waterfront. Target, Pier 4 Warehouse. Time, 6 a.m., December 19th, 1946. That's tomorrow morning, Bumpy said, his voice low and conversational. At dawn, the feds are hitting your warehouse at Pier 4, not the NYPD. You own them. The feds, Hoover's boys. They're coming for the heroin shipment you have sitting in those crates marked olive oil. And the reason your friends in the precinct didn't warn you is because they don't know. The FBI cut them out of the loop an hour ago. Luciano looked up, his hand shaking as he reached for his cognac. How? He whispered. How did you get this? This is impossible. Bumpy leaned forward, his voice dropping to a register that felt like a secret shared in a confessional. You look at that busboy, Marcus, and you see a shadow. You look at the woman cleaning the floors at the Federal Building, and you see a ghost. You look at the driver taking the district attorney to his mistress's house, and you see a piece of furniture. Bumpy tapped the stained paper. I see an army, Charles. The invisible army. I pay for their children's medicine. I pay for their rent. And in return, they give me the trash from the prosecutor's office. They give me the whispers from the back of the judge's limousine. You spent millions buying the men at the top. I spent pennies buying the people who empty their wastebaskets. And do you know what I learned? The secrets are always in the trash. Luciano stared at the black man sitting across from him. For the first time, he didn't see a gangster from Harlem. He saw a spy master. He saw a man who had weaponized the very racism that was supposed to keep him down. The Italians, the Irish, the politicians, they all ignored the help. Bumpy Johnson had turned the help into the most effective intelligence agency in New York City. If that raid happens, Bumpy continued, you lose $2 million in product. You go to prison for the rest of your life. No deportation, no sunny villa in Naples, just a cold cell in Atlanta. Luciano wiped sweat from his upper lip. Can you stop it? I can move it, Bumpy said. My trucks are already near the pier. I have men, invisible men, who can load that cargo and vanish into Harlem before the first FBI car crosses the Brooklyn Bridge. I can hide it where Hoover will never find it. I can wash the money through the numbers game so clean, it'll sparkle. And the price? Luciano asked, his voice hoarse. 50%? Bumpy smiled. It was the smile of a man who had already won the game before the opponent sat down. 0%, Charles. I don't want your heroin money. I want my sit. Bumpy took the contract Luciano had offered, the one demanding 40% of Harlem, and held it over the candle on the table. The paper curled, blackened, and burst into flame. He dropped the burning contract into the ashtray, watching it turn to gray dust. Harlem is mine, Bumpy said, watching the smoke rise. No percentage to the families. No Italian enforcers on 125th Street. We are partners, yes, but we are equals. I save your ass tonight, and you recognize my sovereignty forever. That is the deal. Luciano watched the paper burn. He looked at the FBI memo again, the document that proved his life was hanging by a thread held by Bumpy Johnson. He realized then that the man across from him wasn't playing checkers. He was playing 3D chess while everyone else was throwing dice.
Luciano picked up the bottle of Louis XIII cognac. He poured a generous amount into Bumpy's glass, then into his own. He raised his glass. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the grim respect of a soldier saluting a superior officer. "To the King of Harlem," Luciano said quietly. "To the Invisible Man," Bumpy replied. They drank. Bumpy stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked out of the Stork Club. He didn't look back. He walked past the stunned maitre d', past the frozen socialites, and out into the biting cold of the New York night. He took a deep breath of the freezing air. It tasted like victory. He had walked into the lion's den armed with nothing but a napkin and the truth, and he had walked out with a kingdom. As his Cadillac pulled away from the curb, Bumpy looked out the window at the city skyline. He knew something the Lucianos of the world would never understand. You can build walls to keep people out, but if you don't pay attention to the people who build the walls, they will eventually hand you the bricks to build your own tomb. The raid on Pier 4 never happened. The warehouse was empty when the feds arrived. And in Harlem, the reign of Bumpy Johnson had officially and untouchably begun.